Rich society women humiliate Sandra Bullock at a charity gala without knowing that Keanu Reeves was. Sandra Bullock walked into the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, dressed in an elegant yet simple black gown. The annual charity gala for the Elite Foundation was in full swing, an event attended by the wealthiest socialites, business moguls, and Hollywood's finest. She was there to support an important cause, education for underprivileged children. As she gracefully made her way to the silent auction table, she couldn't help but notice the icy stares from a group of overly dressed society women in the corner. Their diamond-encrusted gowns sparkled under the chandelier lights, their lips curled in smirks as they whispered behind their champagne glasses. "Oh, look who's here," one of them, Victoria Langford, scoffed. "It's her, Miss America's sweetheart. Why is she even here? This event is for people who matter." "Probably looking for a rich husband," another sneered. "I mean, she's been single for ages. Poor thing." Sandra pretended not to hear them, keeping her composure. She had faced worse in Hollywood, but as she reached for a bid card, Victoria intentionally brushed against her, nearly spilling her champagne. "Oh, so sorry," Victoria gasped dramatically. "Didn't see you there." The women giggled. Sandra simply smiled, wiping a drop of champagne from her dress. "No worries," she said calmly. Before she could step away, Victoria's voice rang out again. "Ladies, let's be honest. Some people just don't belong in high society." The laughter was sharp and condescending. Sandra felt her cheeks burn, but she wasn't about to cause a scene. She turned to leave, when suddenly a familiar deep voice cut through the air. "She belongs here more than any of you." The entire room went silent. The women gasped, their eyes widening as they turned to face none other than Keanu Reeves. Dressed in a tailored black suit, he exuded effortless class. He walked straight to Sandra's side, slipping an arm around her waist with an ease that sent shockwaves through the room. Victoria stammered, "Kay Keanu? You know her?" Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Know her? She's one of the kindest, most talented and respected women I've ever met. Unlike some people, Sandra doesn't need to belittle others to feel important." The color drained from Victoria's face. The other women shifted uncomfortably. Keanu wasn't done. "And for the record, she's not here looking for a rich husband. She is one of the biggest donors tonight." Gasps filled the air. The auctioneer, having overheard, cleared his throat and announced, "Yes, in fact, Miss Bullock just made a 6-figure donation to fund scholarships for underprivileged children." The crowd burst into applause. Victoria and her clique shrank into the background, utterly humiliated. Keanu turned to Sandra with a soft smile. "Ready to go?" She smirked. "Thought you'd never ask." As they left together, the entire ballroom buzzed, not about the cruel socialites, but about how Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock had just owned the night. Rich society women humiliate Sandra Bullock at a charity gala without knowing that Keanu Reeves was. Part 2. As Keanu and Sandra walked out of the ballroom, a few of the guests, those who actually admired them, clapped and exchanged knowing glances. The humiliation on Victoria Langford's face was priceless, but Sandra didn't dwell on it. She had more important things to do than entertain petty drama. Outside, the evening air was crisp, the city lights glowing like tiny stars against the dark sky. "You didn't have to do that, you know," Sandra said, glancing at Keanu. "Oh, I definitely did," he replied, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "That was painful to watch," Sandra chuckled. "I was handling it." "I know," he said, grinning, "but you shouldn't have to." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Keanu glanced back at the entrance. "So, are we leaving for good, or do we make a dramatic return?" Sandra raised an eyebrow. "I like the way you think." Keanu smirked. "Shall we?" With that, the two strolled back inside, not sneaking in, not avoiding anyone, but owning their entrance. The moment they stepped through the doors, all eyes were on them. Victoria and her clique had retreated to a corner, whispering furiously, but before they could slink away, a well-dressed older woman in pearls approached them. She was Margaret Kensington, one of the actual elite philanthropists in attendance, one who had real influence. "I just heard what happened," Margaret said, her voice cool but firm. "Victoria, dear, I believe you owe Miss Bullock an apology." Victoria's lips parted in shock. I didn't mean..." Margaret cut her off with a polite but lethal smile. You and your friends have been trying to fit in with high society for years, but let me tell you something. Real wealth doesn't come from money alone. It comes from class, generosity and character, which is why Sandra belongs here. And you, well? Margaret gave her a once-over before turning to Sandra. My dear, I'd love to introduce you to some real benefactors, people who appreciate those who actually make a difference. Sandra smiled. I'd love that. Keanu, standing beside her with his usual effortless cool, added, I'll tag along too, if that's okay with you, Sandra. Sandra smirked. Well, I suppose you can. The rest of the night was a complete shift in energy. Sandra and Keanu mingled with real philanthropists, shared laughs, and even placed a few bids at the auction. Keanu winning a vintage motorcycle, of course. Meanwhile, Victoria and her friends, now completely exposed for their shallow antics, were practically invisible. As the night came to an end, Keanu turned to Sandra. See, this wasn't so bad, she chuckled. Not when you turn it into a movie-worthy moment. He grinned. That's what I do. With that, the two left the gala on top, proving that kindness, grace, and a little well-placed karma always win in the end. Rich society women humiliate Sandra Bullock at a charity gala, without knowing that Keanu Reeves was. Part 3. The night air was still buzzing with whispers about what had just happened inside the gala. As Keanu and Sandra stepped into the valet area, paparazzi lights flashed like tiny explosions. Reporters were already eager to get a headline. Keanu! Sandra, are you two a couple? Keanu, what did you say to those society women? Sandra, any words about being humiliated at the gala? Sandra sighed, adjusting her clutch. You'd think they were the ones embarrassed tonight. Keanu smirked. Give them a headline then. Sandra turned to the cameras, flashing her signature warm smile. It was a lovely night. Some people tried to be mean girls, but as you saw, kindness won. Keanu leaned in, deadpan, and I got a motorcycle out of it. The reporters laughed, their tension breaking, and Keanu casually held out his arm for Sandra. Shall we? They slid into his sleek black vintage car, leaving the flashing cameras behind. The surprise that no one saw coming. As Keanu drove them away from the chaos, Sandra leaned back, exhaling. You know, I wasn't even that mad at them. It's just sad that they think money gives them value. Keanu nodded. They'll learn, eventually. Or they won't. Either way, it's not our problem. Sandra turned to him, an amused smile playing on her lips. You were pretty smooth back there. I mean, coming in like some knight in shining armor. He shrugged. What can I say? I have a thing for helping badass women who don't actually need rescuing. She laughed, shaking her head. So, where are we heading? Keanu's eyes twinkled mischievously. There's an after-party. Private, exclusive, no rich mean girls allowed. Sandra raised an eyebrow. And who's hosting? Keanu grinned. Me. 30 minutes later, they pulled up to a complete different scene. A laid-back rooftop gathering in the heart of LA. No overpriced gowns, no ego-fueled competition, just close friends, good music, and an actual celebration. The moment they stepped onto the rooftop, a cheer erupted. Sandy! She turned just in time to be scooped into a hug by none other than Ryan Reynolds. Oh, fantastic. You brought him too, Ryan said, eyeing Keanu with mock suspicion. Keanu smirked. Still mad I beat you at the motorcycle auction, Ryan scoffed. I let you win. Sandra shook her head. You two are ridiculous. Charlize Theron, Chris Evans, and a few other familiar faces were there, laughing and toasting. The energy was different here. Real, warm, no pressure to impress anyone. As Sandra clinked glasses with Keanu, she took in the moment. You know, she said, this is the real high society. Keanu lifted his glass. To good people. Sandra grinned. To real friends. And as the party carried on under the stars, one thing was clear. Some people measure wealth in money, but the richest people measure it in moments like these. The end, or maybe just the beginning. Keanu Reeves secretly helps a struggling single mom and changes her life forever. Act 1. A chance encounter. It was a cold evening in Los Angeles, and Emma Carter was at her breaking point. She had just finished her third shift of the day at a small diner in Hollywood, exhausted and barely holding on. Her 5-year-old son, Oliver, was waiting for her at the neighbor's apartment, and all she could think about was getting home, tucking him in, and pretending that everything was okay, even when it wasn't. Her car had broken down weeks ago, and tonight the buses were running late. With only a few dollars left in her pocket, she sighed, bracing herself for a long walk home. That's when a sleek black motorcycle pulled up beside her at the curb. The rider, dressed in all black, removed his helmet, revealing Keanu Reeves. "Need a ride?" he asked casually, as if this were an everyday occurrence. Emma blinked, convinced she was imagining things. I don't think you usually offer random people rides," she said hesitantly. Keanu smirked. "True, but I saw you leaving the diner. You looked exhausted. I figured I'd ask." Emma hesitated. It wasn't every day a Hollywood legend offered you a lift home, but she was too tired to overthink. "All right," she said finally. "But if you turn out to be an axe murderer, I'm kicking you off your own bike." Keanu chuckled. "Fair deal." Act 2. A simple ride turns into something more. As they rode through the quiet streets, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. The wind in her hair, the city lights blurring past, the sense that, just for a moment, she wasn't drowning in bills and worries. When they arrived at her tiny apartment complex, Emma hopped off and looked at Keanu. "Thanks for the ride, really. You saved me a long, miserable walk." Keanu tilted his head. "No problem. You work at the diner every night?" Emma nodded, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Yeah, bills don't pay themselves." Keanu studied her for a moment, then pulled something from his pocket, a neatly folded $100 bill. Emma's eyes widened. "Oh no, I can't take that." Keanu simply smiled. "It's a tip. For the best waitress I've never had." She hesitated, then reluctantly took the money. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said, "but I want to." Before she could argue, he revved his engine and disappeared into the night. Act 3. More than just a kind stranger. Emma thought that was the end of it, a random act of kindness from a Hollywood star. But 2 days later, she walked into the diner and found her boss beaming at her. "Emma," he said, "do you have any idea who came in last night?" She shook her head. "Keanu Reeves. Not only did he leave a huge tip, but he asked about you." Her stomach flipped. "What? Why?" The owner grinned. "He said he wanted to make sure you were doing okay. And then, get this, he paid off your entire rent for the next 6 months." Emma's jaw dropped. "You're kidding." "Nope," he said, and I quote, "Everyone needs a little help sometimes. Give her a break." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She had spent so many nights worrying about Oliver, about losing their apartment, about making ends meet, and now, for the first time in forever, she could breathe. That night, as she tucked Oliver into bed, she whispered, "There really are good people in the world, buddy." And somewhere in the city, Keanu Reeves rode his motorcycle into the night, knowing he had just changed a life, without expecting anything in return. The end. Hatch, Keanu Reeves secretly helps a struggling single mom and changes her life forever, Part 2. Act 4, a mysterious invitation. A week had passed since Emma learned about Keanu's unexpected generosity. She still couldn't believe it. Her rent was covered for 6 months. For the first time in years, she didn't have to stress about keeping a roof over Oliver's head. But then, something even stranger happened. One afternoon, as she was wiping down tables at the diner, her boss handed her a small black envelope. "This came for you," he said with a knowing grin. Emma frowned, opening it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note in elegant script. "Emma, I hear you make a mean cup of coffee. Care to prove it?" Attached was an address in Beverly Hills. Her heart pounded. Was this an invitation? Her boss chuckled. "Looks like you've got a fan." Emma bit her lip, unsure. Should she go? What if this was just pity? But then again, Keanu had already done so much without asking for anything in return. Maybe, just maybe, this was something more. That evening, after making sure Oliver was with their trusted neighbor, she took a deep breath and hailed a cab. Act 5, a coffee date with Keanu Reeves. The address led to a cozy private cafe far from the usual Hollywood hotspots. The place was nearly empty, dimly lit with warm golden lights. And there, sitting casually at a corner table, was Keanu Reeves. Dressed in a simple black sweater and jeans, he looked up as she walked in and smiled. "Hey," Emma hesitated. "I wasn't expecting this." Keanu gestured the seat across from him. "Sit. I had to know if the coffee hype was real." She laughed, shaking off her nerves. "All right, but you're in for a strong brew." Minutes later, she returned with 2 cups of fresh coffee. Keanu took a sip, nodding approvingly. "Not bad," Emma smirked. Not bad, that's the best coffee you'll ever have, Mr. Movie Star. He chuckled. Fair enough. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Keanu spoke again. You're a hard worker, Emma. I respect that. She exhaled, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. It's just me and my son, you know? I have to be. Keanu nodded, listening intently. He wasn't like the rich celebrities she saw on TV. He was genuine, present. Oliver, he said. That's his name, right? Emma's eyes widened. You remembered? Keanu shrugged. Of course, he's your whole world. Her heart squeezed. Yeah, he is. Keanu set down his cup, leaning forward slightly. I don't like seeing good people struggle. I've been there, and I've been lucky enough to get help when I needed it. Emma stared at him. You? Struggle? He smiled softly. More than you know. She didn't push. Instead, she simply said, thank you for everything. Keanu held up his cup. To new friends? But Emma clinked her coffee against his. To new friends. And just like that, what started as a simple act of kindness turned into something far greater, a life-changing friendship between an ordinary woman and an extraordinary man. The end, or a new beginning?